like to call this March 12th, 2020 regular board meeting of the Strongsville Board of Education to order. Mr. Anagnastu, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mr. Grozan? No, Mr. Grozan is not present. He's traveling for business. Mr. Micko?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mrs. Hausen?
Here.
Four present.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our next item on our agenda is our district goals. And our district goals, the unsaid one is common sense. So under the level of common sense, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Ryba, and we'll bring forward his report to the community, because I'm sure everybody wants to know about our coronavirus updates.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. Well, it's been a busy and unprecedented week for all of us as we deal with the ever-changing landscape of the coronavirus in the state of Ohio and across the country. And we've been working proactively and judiciously based on the Ohio Department of Health, the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, and the governor's direction. And we've been updating our parents and community each day based on the information that we've been provided. And as we've shared and communicated earlier this evening, based on the governor's directive that all schools across the state of Ohio are required to close for a 3-week period, effective, he says, at the end of business on Monday, so basically starting on Tuesday, next Tuesday. After discussions with our administrative team, we made the decision that you kind of ponder what would be the reasons we would stay open for we had already closed school on Tuesday. Why would we stay open if the governor's saying that schools, it's in the best interest of our children or our community to shut down schools? What would be the reasons to keep school in session on Friday and Monday? So in collaboration with other superintendents, most of us are following the same plan, but we have made a decision to close schools effective immediately. So as we've shared out, even though, and I know there may be some confusion with the different dates that are out there, but there will be no school for students starting tomorrow, March 13th. Following the governor's 3-week restriction, that means the first opportunity for students to return is Monday, April 6th. So we are planning right now for our school to be open and welcome our students back on Monday, April 6th. As I think we've all learned, things change by the hour. Things change as we go throughout. So if new directives are given, if new directions are given, we will follow those and update our community. We've been working on this issue in chunks of time. So before this directive, we've been working, here's what we're going to do the next 2 weeks until we get through spring break. Now we're working a 3-week period of time. Here's what we're going to do through April 5th until we return on April 6th. We are opening, as I shared, because of the notice today, we are opening all of our buildings for students and staff tomorrow from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. So we are asking all of our staff will be back in the building, as well as all of our students, to come back and get anything you need for the next 3 weeks, because after tomorrow, our buildings will be closed and not accessible except for voting day. And on voting day, it will be only accessible for the poll workers and the areas where the elections are being held. So high school students are encouraged, if their Chromebooks are at school, to take those Chromebooks home, to take any textbooks, materials that they need. For our preschool through 8th grade students, any materials, resources that they have at school that they want to take home. We do have access to one-to-one Chromebooks in grades 1 to 8. However, those devices are going to stay at school. We believe it's in our best interest to keep those at school. And also, just as a side note, the charging devices, they're all zip-lined together and in, so we would have to dismantle all of the cards throughout our district to give access to power. So we're going to keep that technology at school. Also, as was shared, we do have a lot of perishable food on hand that was planned to be used throughout the next few days. So our food service department is going to be shipping all of our food over to the middle school. They will be preparing grab-and-go lunches. We would ask all of our students and families that may need and require that as one of their meals a day, to please come to Strongsville Middle School tomorrow from 11:30 to 12:30. We are actually going to do it or run it like a drive-through. We have 2 drives at the middle school with a loop. We ask that parents and families follow the loop. We will be outside in 2 stations, and you will roll down your window and we will give you as many lunches as you need, and then we will get to the next family. I will send out updates in the future if we utilize all of our food inventory tomorrow. That will be it. If we have more left over, we will share with the community that we will extend it for future dates. So that is the immediate things that are going to get us through the next few days. What I would ask everybody is please be patient. I understand that there's a lot of questions, and I understand that sometimes there's a desire to have information right away. I would hope that you would understand that those of us that have been in education for a long time or a short time have never experienced this. And so looking at 3-4 hours ago, we were told and got notice just when everybody else did that schools will be shut down for 3 weeks. We've been proactively planning, but we have to pace out our decisions as we move forward. There are operations of the district that need to continue on, and we're working through what those may be for essential staff. But I just want to give you a highlight of some things that are on our radar, we'll be working through, and we will be communicating with you at the time when that information is available. First of all, most immediately, we will not be running school buses tomorrow for Strongsville City School students. So it is not a school day. It is a come to school and get your materials day. So students need to find their own transportation to school. For our Strongsville students that attend private or parochial schools that will still be in session either Friday and or Monday, we will still be providing transportation services to those students if their school is still open. So for example, St. Joseph and John is open tomorrow. We will provide busing to all St. Joseph and John students. On Monday they are closed. We will not provide busing to those students. So we have a lot of private and parochial schools that we provide transportation services to. We were working with those throughout the afternoon and evening to determine their plans, and we'll provide transportation to those students, but no Strongsville City School students will receive transportation tomorrow because our district is not open for school. It's open to pick up materials and resources. The second thing that I wanted to mention, and I mentioned it in the letter, is if you take a look at our calendar, we will miss 11 instructional days. So counting Friday, we'll miss 6 instructional days, then we have spring break, then we have another 5 instructional days. We have worked with our teaching staff and shared that our building principals at the elementary level are going to share, if they haven't already, with families. Here's some educational resources, some ideas, some suggestions we have for you to support your children during these 11 days, 11 missed instructional days. We have then asked our teachers at the elementary level to then suggest beyond that, for my class, for my grade level, here's some suggestions I have, whether they be online, whether they be PDFs we send to you, whatever they may be, to utilize. For our 6 to 12 teachers, our teachers will be communicating with parents and or students, whether it be via email, via their unified classroom page or Google Classroom, of here's some things that you should be looking at, thinking about doing over the next 2 or 11 days of instructional time that you'll miss. However, because of the idea that we have 6 instructional days, spring break, 5 more instructional days, the idea of truly creating an online virtual learning platform of assigning work and requiring that to be completed and turned in virtually or in hard copy when they return, we didn't feel was in a prudent move at this, or decision at this point in time. That way, what we are providing is educational suggestions for you as parents to determine and decide. There will not be graded work that will be collected when students return. And teachers will be determining and communicating with you what those options may be as we go forward. The other part, when we talk about those school days, I think it's important to note that the governor phrased this as an extended spring break. Those were the words that he used when he communicated that. And so that's part of the reasons why we've made the decisions that we did. But even if we consider this a part of meeting the mandated minimum school year, we have plenty of hours, we attend school, our students attend school plenty of hours beyond the required minimum. So besides our preschool students and our half-day kindergarten students, and our high school students that have early release periods. We are well within the framework of missed days, should that be a requirement. However, I would note that the governor has made mention multiple times that the rules and procedures that are in place, this is a crisis situation, this is a pandemic, that they are going to be cognizant of that, from things to state testing to attendance requirements. That's all on hold for the time being. So I feel comfortable with the plan that we have moving forward. I've shared a lot of information verbally with you. We've shared a lot in writing. Please know that we do have a website that's on our headlines at strongnet.org. It has it's been a landing spot for all of our communications that we've sent out thus far. We will also be creating a separate FAQs site that will house questions that we get and answers, so parents can have one spot to go to see what is the district's stance on this or that. Things that I want you to know are on our radar, and be patient. And by patient, I mean some of these decisions will be done tomorrow. Some of them will be done in the weeks to come. So one of those things is, what are we doing with athletics? I will be meeting with the athletic director and the appropriate administration tomorrow morning, and we will be discussing what's going to happen athletically for practices, athletically for competitions, and we'll share that decision when that's made. You also have to look at the governor put out an order to ban mass gatherings. He did exclude high school athletic or athletic events for competition or practice, barring that there are no spectators other than immediate family members, like they did for the OHSA tournament here recently. So we'll be taking that into all into consideration. We'll be communicating what is happening with practices and what is happening with games. And what is happening if we cancel part of the season with folks that have already paid a pay-to-participate fee. That is all on our radar, and we will address that. The most pressing issue right now is our Disney trip for our marching band and orchestra students. I've reached out to Mr. King, Mr. Heyer, and our high school administration. We are meeting tomorrow morning to discuss that trip, and we will have a decision shortly on the future of that trip. The other thing that we've gotten questions about are grades. For our secondary students, the quarter ends the 20th? Or is it this Friday?
This Friday.
This Friday, the quarter ends. What are we doing with grades? What are we doing with assignments? To be candid, that is not a priority right now for all of the work that we're working through. We will answer those questions. We will work that out. We're going to do what's in the best interest of our students. And so that is a decision that will come later on. But please know that that is something that's on the radar, and we'll be working through those in the days and weeks to come in terms of what grades will look like, when they'll finalize, what about assignments that are still outstanding. We'll be working through those. So I'm looking at my team in the audience, and Jenny, is there anything that I missed so far? Board members, any questions you have or any clarifications or anything you're hearing that it would be good to address?
No, I think you've done a great job.
Thank you. So as things come, feel free to continue to ask questions, share information. You can share it with Dan. Dan's been a great support to me and our district, as well as you can email me directly. Please also know that because we are closed, nobody is going to answer the phones. So use email. Contact us via email. Our administrative team will still be checking their email. A lot of our staff will still be communicating via email. I know our central office team will be as well. So let us know those questions, and we try to have that 24-hour response time. I hope you can understand that the volume has increased recently. So it may take us a couple more days to get back to you, but your questions are important. And we will either get back to you personally, or we will address it in a group response to all parents and community members if we're seeing a frequent question. With that, I know we're going to turn it over to our treasurer, George Agnostu, who wants to talk about the impact on the district finances. George?
Thank you, Mr. Ryba. With recent news of the coronavirus that's being hit globally, financial markets have been in flux. It's great when you're refinancing your home, but if you're investing, the interest rates have dropped. And also, if if you have a 401k, you might have seen that take a hit recently, or any other sorts of investments. Mr. Micko asked me to kind of go over our investments to assure the public that where our funds are invested, they're not in flux as the market is at this point. I'm going to jump ahead in my presentation to the slide, so I know it might be a little hard to see, but right now we have our funds are invested in 3 areas. One, U.S. Bank, and what we keep in U.S. Bank is just 1 month's worth of cash to pay our bills for that month. Then, so it's about $5 to $7 million. Then we have Star Ohio, which is a fund, financial institution operated by the state treasurer's office for governments. It's a money market. So we put our essentially 2-month to 9-month monies that we need out in Star Ohio, where that gains greater interest as if we would have left it in U.S. Bank. For example, right now, the interest rate in Star Ohio is 1.49%. Last week was 1.67. The week before that it was 1.76, and last year was 2.54. So you can see just over the last 3 weeks, it's dropped almost 30 basis points. But it's still a good spot to keep those 2 to 6 month monies. So the money's in there right now. It's $25 million. In February, we received a big property tax advance, and that's a good chunk of our money to get us through these next 6 months. When we get our next big advance would be in June. And then our long-term securities, we have $29 million invested in Meter Financial, and within our portfolio, Meter Financial, that $29 million is split between U.S. government agencies, which are federally backed, U.S. Treasuries, there's 14%, which are federally backed, and 10%, which are FDI insured, and those are $250,000 less, and the FDIC insurance is up to $250,000. So those investments are below that amount. And then the remaining 31% is in commercial paper, and by state law and our investment policy, the commercial paper that we invest has to be rated at the highest percent. The one point that I want to touch on, although our money is in the portfolio, as the markets decrease, all of our money these are all fixed income securities, meaning as long as we hold the monies until security, they're federally backed, and we're not going to lose any of that principal. And the interest rate that we went in is locked in. So for example, the ones that are in the 4 to 5 year range, those were locked in over 2%. So because we locked them in when the market was higher, we're benefiting from that now when the market is low. Now if we have any securities that are maturing, we're going to go into that 0 to 1 year range, because we know right now the markets are declining. So once those mature, we'll see where the market is in 9 months if we want to anticipate any longer range. So to recap, all of our money is in fixed income securities, and they're government backed, and as long as we keep them in till maturity, we'll receive 100% of that principal back, plus interest.
Thank you, George. The whole purpose of all of that was to assure the public that as we're all, myself and I'm sure everyone else, is looking at the stock market and seeing 20% declines, et cetera, the money that is entrusted to the school district is invested in a very suitable way to minimize risk. The majority of our rules are state rules, but which we follow, but we do follow all those rules, and that money that's entrusted to us is in safe investments. And then to piggyback on Cameron's comments, the other thing I wanted to reiterate is that we are in, if not constant, awful regular communication with the mayor and the city officials, and we coordinate with them. And again, I said it at the beginning, I hope that everyone sees that we're using what we consider common sense. Questions that need an immediate answer, we will give you an immediate answer. Questions that don't need an immediate answer, we're going to use that common sense to answer those questions at the time. Every parent, every person, every student, things like grades, et cetera, are important. If you have an A now, you're going to have an A in 3 weeks. If you don't have an A now, you can use those 3 weeks to study and perhaps improve to a better grade. But we'll be reasonable, whether it's testing, whether it's assignments or what have you, we'll be reasonable with all of that. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, we're going to move on to public comment, number 5. And I'm excited that we have 2 people for public comment, Mrs. Joniak and Mr. King.
Good evening. My name is Brian King, and I'm the band director at Strongsville High School. We're here to talk to you about our exciting opportunity to get new uniforms, and also just wanted to highlight a couple accomplishments that the band program has had this year. We had a really successful marching band season this year, and right after that, our wind ensemble, we actually were invited to perform at the Ohio Band Directors Conference at the University of Akron, so that was a really prestigious performance. In January at our solo ensemble contest, we had 75 students participate in 45 events. 37 of those got a superior rating, so we were really excited. 75 is a really high participation for solo ensemble. In February, our wind ensemble also performed in a joint concert with Baldwin Wallace's top band in a joint concert at their conservatory of music. So the students got to not only perform on that stage, but then get to hear that college band. We've also had many collegiate directors come out and work with the students throughout the year in preparation for contest. We just actually had our contest, and unfortunately with all of this happening, they've canceled state contests. They canceled all contests for the rest of the year, including middle school contests. But both of our bands were in the top tier with a superior rating. We were right up top with the other couple of esteemed schools too. So our bands consistently for the last 3 or 4 years were always right there at the top of the ratings. I want to say a special thank you in our fundraising efforts for our new uniforms to Dr. Ryba and Mr. George Ignacio, and their help has been really great. We're bringing this together pretty quickly here. It's been in the works for a while, about a year now. Coming up with a design is really tough. It's hard. We get a lot of input from a lot of different people, and you could go rounds all day about should the buttons be silver, should they be gold, should they? So, you could really get into a wormhole with that stuff. I also want to thank our SIM board members for their help and support, and also our SIM treasurer, Katie Dula, and all of our students and parents that are in attendance tonight. So I want to go ahead and bring in our student who is wearing this uniform. You're going to get to see it. So let's welcome in Devin Maddox. So this is our new uniform. We are changing the Strongsville on the right is going to be in white, so that you can see it better. But this is a very needed expense for us. Our current uniforms are around 16 years old, and that's about they were past their lifespan now. So that's about how long they last, is about 15 years. That's kind of pushing it. So we're right at that line right now. And so we're really excited for this change. I also wanted to show you guys, this is our guard uniform. We don't have a sample of that yet, but you can pass that down and take a look at it. We'll also be getting new raincoats, and everything is included on this. So we'll also get new parkas that come with this, and we'll get a new banner to go with the band. We're also looking at getting a collared shirt for our parades in town to look a little more collegiate. So this kind of exciting new look for the group, and the students are really excited this year. They get to be actually tailored to the new uniform. So, we're really excited about that. So, let's thank Devin for coming in.
Brian, now, before you go on, one of the things I know you educated me on is about the new style of band uniforms, because some people may see this and say, oh, that's a lot of black.
Oh.
So talk a little bit about how that is popular and why that's the style moving forward for marching band uniforms.
It's a change from the ones that we have now. If you look at most high school bands now, they've gone to this. We had a green pants, but it wasn't a very good contrast from the green grass. So the black pants are slimming for students, and it's also a little more of a formal look on the field. But certainly the contrast against the green grass looks nice. But I think you'll notice that's the direction most bands are in now that surround us. It has gone with the black. The black shoes that will come with it, the students can also double with their concert uniforms. So those will be able to be used throughout the year. And same with the new guard uniforms. That black is really slimming for students. And we think it's going to be a nice change. So, any questions about it?
I want to know if Devin likes the new uniform.
Yes.
Great.
And will you be able to march better?
Oh, yeah.
Significantly better with the new uniform?
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because the change from white shoes to black shoes, besides that white shoes are hard to keep clean for high school students, and by the time you're a senior, you don't want to buy a new pair, but now they're yellow. Black does make your marching look a little cleaner, so that's okay. We'll take it. So, well, let's thank Devin again for coming in today. Thank you, Devin. And just in closing of my portion of it, I just want to thank the students and for all of their hard work and time. Sometimes I think it gets even overlooked at how much time these band students put in of time. Whether it's all the parades or, our summer kind of ends like in mid-end July. And just in getting, a lot of people say, well, after marching band's over, you must have a lot of free time now. But that's where we start kicking up rehearsals for contests. We have evening rehearsals for the top two bands, jazz band every night, all the contests on the weekends. And so they put in a lot of time. If we could give a round of applause for all of our band students. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and introduce up the person that has really, really been the heart of this. She has it's incredible the money that she's raised and her passion into this. Both of her boys are currently in the band, great band students, and she was in the band at one time. And so I just want to thank her for all of her work, and if you would please help me welcome up, this is Tracy Joniak.
Thank you. When I was in the band, I had a lot of hair because that was the thing in 1989, and it looked good back then. So I'm Tracy Joniak, and I'm here on behalf of Strongsville Instrumental Music Boosters. And SIM is the 501c3 that supports and enriches instrumental music education in Strongsville schools for grades 5 through 12 students. I'm here to share with you the exciting news about our program, how we're getting the new uniforms, and I want to talk to you about how we're paying for them. So when you see our marching Mustangs, it's really easy to spot their precision, their skill, and their dedication. But what you don't see is their uniforms are 16 years old, which is older than our current freshman and sophomore students. And they're getting a little threadbare. There's a lot of sewing at meetings, at games, and emergency figuring out if this thing can be preserved for this thing. So it is time for them to be replaced. And SIM is excited to announce that we have purchased new uniforms for our band students. So I wanted to tell you about how we're paying for these uniforms. Our uniform fund comes from 3 different sources of funding. The first source, the largest source, is that every student who marches with our band pays a uniform fee. That uniform fee gets paid to the district, but it's to cover things like uniform repairs, dry cleaning, new parts, all the things that come along with having an inventory of uniforms. A small portion of that money has been set aside in an account for us housed through the district for the replacement of uniforms. That makes up the bulk of our funding. And so that's from the people over the last 16 years who have marched with our group, have contributed to that fund as a part of their uniform fees. The next pot of money is a CD that SIM has set aside specifically for uniform replacement. We've known this is coming. We've been preparing for it all along. And these are funds from things that we do, like all the concessions at football and basketball games, as well as our individual fundraising things that our students have worked through. So that money has been set aside through Music Boosters. So the third pot of money is the campaign that I'm spearheading. And I'd like to share with you what we're doing to make sure our students all look as sharp as Devin this coming fall. We began an intense campaign to let our community know about the need to replace these band uniforms. So people didn't realize how old they were, and they didn't realize that they were starting to fail in critical ways like, holes and that sort of thing. And our volunteers have kept those uniforms in amazing condition. Think back to your own closet. You don't have things that have been worn every week for 16 years without an amazing team of volunteers. And our volunteers who handle the uniforms are phenomenal. They're amazing. They're amazing. So we began an intense campaign to let our community know about the need to replace these band uniforms. So I'd like to thank anybody who shared our information either on social media, through email, and through our printed letters. We're currently gratefully accepting donations through May 1st. We have some new incentives for people who choose to sponsor our uniform drive, and you can find all those incentives and all that information on our website, www.strongnat.org/SIMB. Thank you to our supportive community. We are very close to our goal of providing new band and color guard uniforms for our students. To celebrate this exciting new uniform coming to us, we are planning on hosting a wingding on April 25th from 5 to 8 at the Harvest Saloon. So the tickets and more information about that, and as well as our uniform campaign, can be found on our website. My amazing team of volunteers is helping put together a great event, and we'd love to partner with any local businesses who'd like some exposure and who would like to help our band. The best way to do that is to reach us at simfundraising@gmail.com or simsponsorship@gmail.com. We'd love to work with anyone who would, be able to work with us. Reaching out to us is a great way to be a part of our event or to contribute to the Marching Mustang Uniform Fund. With your help, we are proudly looking forward to providing these new uniforms for our students and continuing the amazing tradition to represent Strongsville into the future. Thank you.
Tracy, I just wanted to thank you and Mr. King for all your hard work and efforts on behalf of our band students and all of our music students. It's much appreciated. I have a very short memory. I forgot the web address for SIMB. Would you tell me again?
It's www.strongnat.org/SIMB.
And I forgot when the wingding is.
April 25th at the Harvest Saloon from 5 to 8 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is recognition. Do we have any today?
No recognitions tonight.
Moving on, we have approval of minutes for the January 22nd, February 6th, February 20th, and February 27th board meetings. All video and audio are permanent part of the minutes and available online. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Motion by Laura, second by Seth. Any discussion? I will thank Polaris for hosting our Board of Education retreat. We had a good meeting, a good retreat, and we enjoyed the facility. Any other discussion? George?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next on the agenda is Treasurer's Report. George?
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I have a few items for your consideration this evening. The first one is which can be found in Exhibit A, is the financial report for the month ending February 29th, 2020. I do have my corresponding presentation. I'm going to try and do it from here rather than the podium if the clicker cooperates. Nope, I'll be going to the podium. So February is a big month for us in the sense we receive one of our largest piece of revenues for the year that we have to make it last for 6 months is for the first half of the calendar year, our property tax advance. So we get about 4 or 5 advances a year. There's 3 for the first half and then 2 in the second half. The first half, we receive a small portion in January, a big portion in February, and then the remaining small portion in March, which those funds essentially fund our expenditures through the middle of July once we receive a small portion of the second half advance, and then again in August, the remaining advance, which we have to have last until the middle of January. We get that first half advance again. So it's kind of that cycle where we get our big chunks of revenue 5 times a year that we have to stretch out the year to make our expenditure, to meet our expenditure needs. So for this month, revenues totaled $26 million for the month. Through February, the district has revenue in the amount of $66,886,000, which is an increase of $6.9 million compared to February of last year, in which revenue totaled $59.6 million. The increase is primarily due to the new operating levy that went into effect for this tax collection of the 5.9 mils beginning January 1st, 2020. And I know Mr. Rabo said it during his State of the Schools. We can't thank the community enough for the passage of the levy, which has been able to support us for the next 10 years. So for the remaining of the year, from March to June, we're projected to receive about $12.5 million during that period for a total revenue of $79.4 million, which is a $1.4 million increase or 1.76% above the forecast, which is primarily due to recent tax settlement agreements that we received, refunds from prior year expenditures from the BWC, and then also a refund from the county auditor's fees for unused fees during the appraisal. And then through February, our interest revenue totaled $544,000, which is an increase of $63,000 compared to February of 2019, which totaled $480,000. Expenditures, general fund expenditures totaled $47.2 million, and we have outstanding encumbrances of $2.6 million. Of this total of $49.8, it reflects about 65.6% of the district's total appropriation of $76.5. In comparison to where we are for the school year, through February, 8 of 12 months have passed, or 16 or 24 pays, which that benchmark is 66.67%. So we're slightly under that by a percentage or so, and it's and compared to this point last year, it was 64.94%. So we're in line to where we should be. Salaries averaged 1.7 million for February, which is similar to January of 1.7 million. And total salaries total 27.9 million for the year, which is an increase of about 500,000 or 1.82% compared to February last year. Benefits, the monthly benefit expenditures were 1.4 million for February, which is the same as the 1.4 million in January. In total, benefits total about 11.4 million, which is an increase of 283,000 or 2.55% compared to February last year. And then cash balance, as you'll see, our cash balance is high at the end of this month, and it's because of that large chunk of tax revenue which inflates our balances, which we'll have to rely on to get us through the rest of the year. To that point, we have sorry, I lost my place. So at the end, the cash balance at the end of February is 52.3 million. The unencumbered balance is 49.7 million, and we are within our benchmark of having the 60 days operating cash on hand. At this time, it's 12.9 million. A general fund summary. What this chart shows is comparisons to February on a monthly basis over the last 3 years and on a fiscal year to date. A couple items to highlight. There's an all other revenue. This year it's $70,000 higher compared to February last year for the, in the all other category, and that's mainly due to a tax settlement agreement that we received in February this year, net of SF-14 tuition from other districts that we received in February last year. We should get it in March this year. And then also, February to February last year, this February shows salaries being lower compared to last year, and the reason for that is last year in February we had settled our OPSI contract, and all the retro payments for that contract were done in February. So last year's salaries for February were slightly inflated. Overall salaries are salary and benefits are $782,000 or 2% higher compared to last year fiscal year to date. General fund revenues, touched on those. Again, what's remaining is $12.5 million. We're about $1.4 million over the forecast. What we're really going to see is when we get our tax settlement, which will be tomorrow, to see where we finish the year with our taxes. So we'll see how we did with the property taxes and also the TIF revenue. How does that compare to previous years? Again, property taxes collections are higher, and it's due to the levy that was just in place. State foundation slightly less than last year. Property tax allocation right in line, and again, other revenues right in line to where it was the previous year. Expenditures, talking that benchmark, 8 months have passed, 66.67% is the benchmark. We're slightly under that by a percentage. Expenditures through January, again, the chart on the left shows the percent by category expended or encumbered. Again, it's in line to where it should be based on the time of year. And then expenditures by category, as you'll see, the chart on the right, the salaries and benefits are slightly higher compared to the previous years. And purchase services and material supplies, those somewhat fluctuate based on the time and need. Again, kind of touched on cash balance. At the end of February, our unencumbered cash balance in the general fund is 49.7%. And then where cash balances are invested, touched on this slide earlier. The one part that I wanted to, I didn't get a chance to highlight is I mentioned where the Star Ohio interest rate currently is. It's currently at 1.49%. Last week, it was at 1.67%. The week before, it was 1.76%. When we have our meter portfolio, the goal of our meter portfolio is to beat Star Ohio. Because if we don't do this, we can just put in Star Ohio and let Star Ohio invest it. That Star Ohio, as you can see, fluctuates on a weekly basis. Right now, with all our investments in meter, our average annual yield is 1.87%. So we're currently beating that Star Ohio rate with those. And the longer we go out, the better interest rate we get. So again, when the market was high, we tried to capitalize on those longer-term investments. Now, granted, we're not just throwing everything at longer-term investments. We're also looking, I have our 5-year forecast, and I have it broken out month to month to see how much cash we need on hand. So if we can't have that, if we need to have that cash on hand on a shorter period, we'll invest in shorter investments. But if we can go out that 5 years, we look to see what we can do as a district, where we can allocate our resources. And the goals that we're trying to establish for these different buckets is to have about 30% of these investable funds in the 0 to 1 year range, 15% in the 1 to 2 year range, and again in the 2 to 3 year range, 20% in the 3 to 4, and 20% in the 4 to 5. And the goal is, as these investments are kind of creating a ladder, as these investments are maturing, that we're able to put them in the buckets that they're able to go into. Any questions on the financial report? Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going up here because I have a few more slides related to a few other topics in the presentation. The next item is the tax rate resolution, which is Exhibit B. This is an annual resolution that we need to submit to the county. If you recall, back in January, I did the tax budget where essentially we present the need to the auditors, or to the county auditors, where for the need for the taxes, and then they set the tax rate, they send it back to us, we review it, and approve the tax rate resolution, send it back to them, and they set the tax rate for next calendar year. In that process, as we were doing that, we looked at our bond rate. So all the rates are, so in the general fund, besides the inside millage, all the outside millage, it's set to an effective rate, so we can't collect more than what we said the levy should be. For the bond rate isn't subject to the effective rate, so it looks at, currently the rate is at 3%, and it collects based on what our principal and interest is for the year, what we need it to be, so that's what it's set at. Based on the increased evaluation, we looked at that 3 mil rate, and working with the county auditors is can we adjust that, because since the valuation went up, we'd be collecting more than what we would need. So within the tax rate resolution, we're bumping it down to 2.8 mils. So it's a reduction of 0.2 mils. It might not sound significant, but what that means to each individual taxpayer is that their tax bills for next calendar year will be reduced by $7 per $100,000 valuation. So I just wanted to touch on that. That be a slight, not a lot, but slightly less. So every penny counts. The next two items, which will be make up items C and D, are new funds for fiscal year 2020 and grant approval. And I'm combining these into one. There are SEF, Strongsville Education Foundation grants that were awarded to schools and teachers that applied for them. So the first one is for the Strongsville Strongsville Early Learning Preschool. They applied for an adaptive climbing wall. The total cost of the amount of the grant is $4,635.72. The fund I'm creating is 019,997, and the objective is to improve the variety of physical activities available at the preschool to all students. We'll like to expand the variety of activities and ensure all students have access regardless of their abilities, and it was applied by the principal, Megan Surso. Although this is being donated by the Strongsville Education Foundation, it's being funded by Mike Kalenich and family in memory of their granddaughter. And Megan at the preschool is going to put a plaque and do something special. Mr. Kalenich didn't want a lot of recognition for it, but thought it was worth noting. The next item is flexible seating at Muraski. The total amount of the grant award is $425 and Fund 199971, and is to provide students with flexible seating options so that they are able to improve collaboration and resiliency skills in the counseling setting. And this was applied for by Denise Kandow, which is the guidance counselor at Muraski. And I'm not sure what the exact term for all these items are, but there's the pictures for the flexible seating that they'll be going towards. And then the third item was applied by the second grade teachers at Kinsner Elementary in the amount of $250. And it's for flexible seating as well. And it's for new stools to provide options for students to use in various spaces around the classroom, including during group time and meeting for small group instruction with the teacher. With increased seating options, more students will have access to active learning spaces during various activities throughout the day. And it was led by Mrs. Amy Valentine, second grade teacher at Kinsner. So that concludes that portion. Any questions so far? No. Item E, which is the amended permanent appropriations, which can be found in Exhibit C. Those changes included for the 019 grant for the grant funds, then also a few state grants which we got the final dollars amount, so adjusting those allocations. And then the last item is for an employee annuity 403B 457 third-party administrator. Those are for our payroll deductions where employees have the opportunity to invest in 403Bs and 457s. Currently, we're administrating it in-house. There's a lot of legal compliance that must be followed, and as that's ever changing, a lot of districts are going to a third-party administrator. It's free of charge to the district. It's endorsed by OASBO, and a lot of neighboring districts are using it. So after exploring, we felt this was our best option, and it's cost-free to the district, and it'll keep us in compliant with our 403Bs, 457s. So with that, that concludes my report if there's no further questions.
Thank you, George. Good report. And I want to make sure we thank the SEF and the individuals who donate to the SEF for their well-needed and well-deserved donations. The adaptive wall looks very cool. And I now turn it over to Dr. Ryba, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Micko. I do not have anything additional under my report since we went up to the top of the meeting. So I'm going to ask Operations Manager Steve Breckner to come up with his update. I do want to make one correction to the agenda. Under number 1, you'll see there's a little asterisk next to it, which means it's part of the consent agenda, but we have a separate vote. Please scratch out. This will be a separate vote and will not be a part of the consent agenda. So I turn it over to you, Steve.
All right, good evening, everyone. A couple items for your consideration tonight. The first one is the purchase of 2 video scoreboards for Strongsville High School main gymnasium. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the purchase of 2 video scoreboards for the Strongsville High School main gymnasium from ScoreVision at the revised price of $141,000, an increase of $16,000 from the original quoted price of $125,000 due to enlarging the size of the second scoreboard. Be it further resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the scoreboard advertising sales agreement between the Board of Education and the Strongsville Athletic Boosters. The boosters intend to make donations over the next 5 years totaling the amount of the high school main gymnasium scoreboard purchase of $141,000, less the amount contributed by Serpentini Chevrolet of $60,000 from the February 20th, 2020 donation agreement. The boosters will make an initial donation of $30,000, followed by 5 annual donations of $10,200 per year thereafter, which the district will invoice the boosters annually in November, beginning November of 2020, with a potential for larger annual donations should adequate funds become available to fulfill the $81,000 commitment earlier per the terms outlined in the exhibit. And that's Exhibit E.
Not yet.
So everyone's going to ignore the asterisks to the left of number 1. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mr. Roberts. Do I have any discussion?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Can you tell us how this decision came about to enlarge the second board?
I do know that there were some issues with integration between one board being one size and then other board being another. So for the price of the increase, it was decided to make the scoreboards the same size and decrease that technical glitch.
So we're going to take the one down and put the new one up? No? Yes?
This is
So
so the
explain this to me.
scoreboards themselves are, for lack of a better term, just individual screens that are hooked together and then they form one picture. What we're going to do is hook more screens on to make it the same size.
Thank you.
So, and I add a little bit of comment to it. Similar to when you go to Best Buy and you look at all the TVs, they all look big enough, and you buy the smaller one and you get it in your house, and it's not big enough. And in the TV world, you live with it. But in the scoreboard world, because they are modular, this additional doesn't mean we're removing the existing one. We're just adding enough panels to make it bigger, because bigger's better, I guess. But there is, it will make it nicer, and there is an artistic or aesthetic difference between the ratios between the boards, and we've never bought them before, so I don't, it's hard to know what the effect is gonna be until you see them. And I would like to compliment the athletic boosters, especially their president, Dan Martin. When they saw them, they said, we need to make this better. And they committed to making it better, and so now we're in a position to approve it. But we do wanna, I do wanna thank, on behalf of the board again, Bob Serpentini and Serpentini Chevrolet. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be doing this. And I want to thank the athletic boosters. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be doing this. And then I want to thank our crack team of employees, because if it wasn't for their smarts and their planning, and I'm looking at Mr. Binkley and I'm looking at Mr. Faust, we wouldn't be doing this.
And there might be a dirty secret that someone just wanted to rent a cherry lift one more time, but that's not true. We needed a bigger scoreboard. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. George, can you take the roll?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Motion passes.
The second item are a couple gifts. Mr. and Mrs. George Mueller donated an AED, an automated external defibrillator, valued at $1,500 for use in the district. And also the Strongsville Football Backers, or SFB, will donate additional weight room equipment valued at $23,415 and flooring valued at $3,380 pending Board of Education acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. In terms of the curriculum report, Erin's unable to be here tonight, so I will fill in for her. We have two textbooks for your consideration. The first is a theater arts textbook adoption. Before I read the resolution, we did hire a teacher a year or so ago with the sole purpose of building back up our theater program. He has done that. We will have theater-specific courses next year, and so these are the textbooks to support that program, and we're very excited about that. Be it resolved, the recommendation that textbooks be adopted for theater arts is presented in the exhibit. These books have been recommended by professional staff and reviewed by the Citizens Curriculum Advisory Committee, and these books will be purchased with fiscal year 20 funds as found in Exhibit F. And also to purchase textbooks for the Advanced Placement Research textbook. Just as the last one, it was recommended by professional staff, reviewed by the Citizens Curriculum Committee, and the books will be purchased with the FY20 funds. If you remember, a few years ago, we started an AP program that's AP Seminar that goes into AP Research. That went from one section of the course. I think next year, AP Research will be maybe 4 sections. Again, our students pick a topic of interest, they research it. It is almost like a mini thesis, a mini dissertation. We've been working with the course, I've been working with the class, and been honored to come in and talk with them about statistical analysis, about developing survey tools. So these are textbooks to help support them in their work. And that can be found in Exhibit G. Student-teacher agreement, be it resolved upon my recommendation that the student-teacher agreement between Ohio University and Strongsville City School District be approved as presented in Exhibit H. This is the precursor to then accepting student teachers from the Ohio University. So this is the first step in that process. As you can see in items 4 and 5, these are overnight trips for the Strongsville High School boys varsity and junior varsity lacrosse teams to participate in competitions either in Columbus, Ohio or Toledo, Ohio. We're not saying that these are canceled at this point, but at this point in time, I do not think it's prudent to go forward and vote on these. I would recommend, with your approval, Mr. Miko, that we pull these from the consent calendar, we table these until a further time. We actually have another board meeting scheduled prior to these trips. That'll give me time to confer with our appropriate administration and provide a better recommendation. That work?
That works. Does anybody have any questions on that? We're good?
Okay. Number 6 and 7, these are out-of-state trips, but these are next school year in the fall or winter of 2020. So I am recommending keeping these, and obviously we can adjust as needed as we move forward. But the first is the Strongsville High School girls soccer team traveling to Albuquerque, New Mexico to participate in a soccer competition October 8 through 11, 2020. Transportation will be via commercial airline. Expenses are paid by participating students for proceeds from the Adidas National Soccer Showcase. And the final trip is for our boys varsity basketball program to travel to Kissimmee, Florida to participate in the KSA Event Holiday Basketball Tournament December 27th through 31st, 2020. Transportation will also be via commercial airlines and expenses will be paid by participating students and with proceeds from fundraising activities. That concludes the curriculum report, unless there's questions. All right, with that, I'm going to ask Andy Trujillo, our Director of Student Services, to come up to the podium for his report for this month. Andy?
Good evening, members of the board. I have one item for your consideration this evening. It is my annual recommendation for extended school year program for students with disabilities at the preschool and school age level to be held at the middle school for the dates of June 16th through July 23rd, 2020. Any questions about extended school year? All right.
Thank you, Andy. Next, with the Human Resources report, our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Pelko. Jenny?
Thank you. Under Human Resources this evening, I have the following items for your consideration. Under E1, the resignation of a non-certificated staff. Under E2, appointment for non-certificated staff, appointments for certificated substitutes, and appointments for non-certificated substitutes. Under E3, changes in hours for non-certificated staff. E4, changes in status for non-certificated staff. Under E5, medical leave for an administrator, medical leaves for certificated staff, and medical leaves for non-certificated staff. Under E6, unpaid leave for certificated staff, and unpaid leaves for non-certificated staff. And finally, under E7, we have our volunteers or chaperones mentors. And that concludes my report.
We do not have any updates for technology this month, so with that, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda is report on Polaris Career Center. I'll start with a quick shout out to two of our students. Lydia Rabney, she placed first place in the medical terminology contest, and she's part of our medical professionals program at Polaris. And we also want to congratulate Michael Trudler, who's also a senior. He achieved third place in the Precision CNC contest that they just recently had, and he's in our Precision CNC program. So we congratulate them and thank them, and unfortunately, I don't think they'll be going on to any other competitions because just like the athletics and everything else, they're all being postponed indefinitely, which is a fancy way of saying postponed. And then just to reiterate some of the comments we made earlier, Polaris is following the same schedule as the other schools. Polaris is closed as of tomorrow. They've communicated to the students to be able to come and get any books or what have you they want, but they're following the same pattern that all the other school districts in the area are following. I will highlight that because Polaris has a lot of programs that bring in the public, those are all also on hiatus, and that's the culinary program where the public comes in for lunch. That's the cosmetology program. I know my nails are going to suffer because I won't be able to get my manicure, but we'll all take it day by day. But all of those programs are on hold at Polaris. And that concludes the Polaris report. As far as legislation is concerned, like everything else, it's kind of on pause. There isn't a whole lot to report at this board meeting. Moving on to board liaison reports. Why don't we just start with Michelle and work our way down?
There are two things to report on tonight in terms of the city. The first was that there was a city council meeting last week, and a couple of notable things happened at that. First of all, the city swore in two new sergeants, Derek Apo and Ron Stoltz. And then to replace them, they also swore in two new officers, Randy McLaughlin and David Gallagher. You may have heard rumblings in the community already about this, but the community is seeking proposals and designs for development of the center of town. That's not something they're redoing after they did the city plan. It's something that they're going to seek now for the first time in hopes of moving forward and redesigning, restructuring the center of town for this 21st and some years century. The other thing that happened too, and I reported on this last time, was that last time Barrio was granted a special permit in order to have an alcohol permit in the city. Condado Tacos, which is a similar concept to Barrio, applied for the same permit and was denied. So Barrio at this time is coming, Condado is not, but there are appeals and things like that that I think we should expect. And finally, Tony Biandello, who is the current building commissioner, is retiring at the end of April. And secondly, as many of you probably know, the mayor gave the State of the City address this past Tuesday at the Chamber lunch, and several of us were lucky enough to attend that and enjoy a lunch there. A couple of notable things. The mayor was kind enough to acknowledge and thank Dr. Cameron Ryba for his work in the community. And he also acknowledged a couple of other community and business members, including Brian Cruz, who owns and operates Sergeant Clean's Car Wash. He also mentioned that Strongsville maintains a AAA bond rating and is one of only 5 cities in Cuyahoga County to hold that. So that is important and impressive for our community. And one of the things that will affect you day to day is that the city, as you can see now, especially at Pearl and 82, is they're implementing the new traffic lights. So that process is in progress, but it is expected to take until February 2021 for that to be complete. So we have a ways to go, but it is underway, and it appears that they're starting with the main intersections. And that concludes my report.
Laura?
Yes, Strongsville Education Foundation. There was a meeting this morning here at the board building. There was discussion on scholarships. They are all set with our guidance department. And the scholarship process is going on right now, and our graduating seniors can start applying for those online. So maybe when they're home these next 3 weeks, I know my son will be working on that. So get out there and get those scholarships filled out. They also had lots of discussion on grants. As George said, they approved the ones for the elementary schools. There's more coming up. There's a habitat improvement for Sarar. Unfortunately, there was one approved for the SMS kids to go to Fox 8, but Fox 8 is not allowing visitors right now, so that one is postponed. They also discussed the band uniforms, and they are graciously making a donation to the campaign for new band uniforms. And lastly, there was a lot of discussion about Jockeys and Juleps, which will be on May 2nd at the Strongsville Education Foundation, and I would encourage everyone to get your tickets. It's one of their biggest fundraisers that go back towards these grants and scholarships.
Oh, Did you want to continue with PTA?
Well, PTA, everything is on hold. Meetings have been canceled as of right now, and we will follow the guidelines of the school district.
Okay, and board committee reports? Do you want to start, Seth, do you want to do finance? Sure.
Next meeting is going to be on April 27th. We continue to look at the rates that are out there from the bond standpoints and see where it makes sense to move forward or not. As of right now, we're going to continue to wait as we expect the rates to continue to drop and go through that process. And that's pretty much all we have right now.
And next meeting is April 27th, 2020 at 6:30 PM in the admin offices. Policy Committee, our next meeting is to be announced, and we're anxiously awaiting that date. Michelle, do you have a Facility Committee?
I don't have a report at this time.
When's your next meeting?
The next meeting is April 23rd, 2020 at 6:30 PM here in the administrative offices.
You want to talk about Business Advisory, Laura?
Sure. Our next meeting will be April 17th, 2020, 7:30 a.m. at the high school.
Excellent. And then if Seth doesn't mind, I was going to announce that we wrangled and we did not have a student achievement liaison at the beginning of the year, and I fought Seth hard for it, but he won. So if we need to put that on the agenda or what have you, but Seth will be working with Mr. Faust and is looking forward to highlighting some of our student achievement. So we're looking forward to that, and I thank Seth for stepping up. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of the consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing on the agenda with asterisks are adopted by one single motion unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests otherwise. I will highlight that the donation agreement from Business Services for the Score Vision is not part of the agenda, along with under Section C curriculum, we are removing number 4, overnight trip, and number 5, overnight trip for the lacrosse teams, and we will bring those back when appropriate. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Hearing none. George?
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Superintendent, do you have any timely information?
The calendar is free.
It's been an hour and 15 minutes.
I know, right? No, there's no additional timely information at this time.
Board of Education Other. Anybody have anything? Okay. The only thing I'm going to add during Board of Education Other is I was looking at the Ohio Department of Education's website on the coronavirus, and our state superintendent, and I cannot pronounce his name, Dr. Paulo De Maria. The one thing he commented on, and I think it bears repeating, is that we should all, in the next days ahead, be kind and compassionate to each other. We can all Monday morning quarterback whether we're doing enough or whether we're doing too much, but at the end of the day, we're doing what we think is best and right, and regardless of what our personal opinions are, we should all be kind and compassionate to each other as neighbors, friends, and family. Any others? Meeting notification, we have our next meeting on Thursday, April 2nd, 2020 at 7 p.m. in this building. And then we have another regular Board of Education meeting on April 16th, 2020, 7 p.m. And I do want to thank my board members and the admin team for their flexibility for changing this board meeting to this week. That was done because I was going to be traveling next week, but I won't be traveling next week. We do have reason for executive session on the topics of
To consider the appointment and employment of a public employee or official, and to confer with an attorney for the Board of Education concerning disputes involving the board that are subject of pending or imminent court action.
what was, the first one was the evaluation?
To consider the appointment and employment of a public employee or official.
Okay. And can we add an evaluation of employee?
That's not one of the,
Which is the one that evaluation would be?
George, you,
Be the evaluation of the treasurer superintendent.
Yes,
that one?
Okay.
that one.
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mr. Roberts. Any discussion? George?
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Enter an executive session at
8:20. We have no reason for any other business. Have a good evening, and thank you.